it is time to talk about one of my most anticipated releases for 2023, The Seeds of War by João F. Silva. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is the Seeds of War Rapid Review. Before we jump into the review today, make sure you check in the description box down below for links to my social media and Discord, should you want to come along for the ride. Now, Seeds of War was a gripping, character-driven, grimdark fantasy which really did celebrate the lives of people less talked about, and I absolutely loved it. The seeds of war are being planted all over the world, and at its core lie our three main protagonists. First up, we are introduced to Giml. She's a single mother of two, she's rough as guts, and she has built the town that she resides in from the ground up. With a nickname like the Viper, it is hard not to be sucked into her past, present, and want to know everything about what she's going to do in the future. At current, she makes a living running a shabby tavern and keeping her coin purse full by farming a powerful drug-like elixir from the livers of the reptilian creatures in her farmlands. The news of this powerful elixir and its strength alternating abilities has spread, and now nobility wants a piece for themselves. When a herald comes to town demanding that Giml sell her land and relinquish control of the elixir's source, she knows she's about to have one hell of a fight on her hands. Next up, we have God himself, or Aberrasis, the man who saved the world. Years ago, on the eve of the world's destruction, Aberrasis stumbled across an orb, one that held more power than he could ever imagine. Upon finding the orb, Aberrasis conducted a miracle. This miracle opened the ground, swallowing man and beast, ending the current war that was ongoing. It also created the township that Giml now occupies, and since that day, his life has been plagued by migraines and a thirst for more power and a dirty, dark secret. Finally, we have Red Now, the leader of an infamous mercenary group on the tips of everyone's tongues. Plagued with dreams and hallucinations of his deceased sister, he doesn't know how much longer he can fight or what will push him over the edge and into madness. But when tensions start to rise, the royals and the underdogs will call on his troop and the nightmare of the blood collector to fight their battles for them. Red Now is ready to retire, but this one last fight has caught his attention. It's time for this old smokesmith to walk the line between man and beast once more. There was a lot that I liked about the Seeds of War. It's definitely a character-driven story, which is why I sort of gave character outlines rather than an overall plot, but they do intertwine quite well within the story, in my opinion. The things that I liked the most about Seeds of War do start with the characters and their interactions. This is a character-driven story, like I said, through and through. All three POVs that we follow are powerhouses within their own right. Each character has come from a background that you wouldn't stereotypically see celebrated in a book like this, or, any book really. And they're celebrated in a way, even though it is quite a dark tale. The author has plunged purposefully into these stories that are less talked about and given the reader a look at how our elderly, how our single parents, and even how our disabled populations can absolutely hold their own. And boy oh boy, do they do so in this book. Each of our characters interacted with the world that showed me as the reader how they were treated previously and how they protected themselves, and now as they continue to grow and their stories unfold. Another thing I really enjoyed about Seeds of War is the scope of the world itself. Silva has provided the reader with a dark and gritty yet rich world. One of my favorite aspects of the world building were definitely the creatures that we got to discover along the way, and the way that the animals or the creatures were used to casually showcase different terrains or modes of transport, and even the ways of war in terms of these beasts being trained up for battle. Some of these animals were terrifying. I'm looking at the blood sleuths specifically here, and there was a small bestiary at the beginning of the book, so you can go and have a look at what they look like, but they were unpleasant. Some of the animals were more practical for things like modes of transport, but they all added to the dark tone of the story. I also like how the author has really stuck to his strengths, and although we only see a handful of towns or areas explored within this debut, they were done in a vivid and visual way so that I could place myself in these locations as we move through the story. Examples of this were, I felt like I could feel the humidity of the marshlands, that hot, sweltering, smelly terrain that housed these reptilian beings. And I could almost feel seasick at the choppy waters when Aberrasis was travelling around by sea and wasn't really enjoying it. I feel like there is still a lot more to be explored in this world, but I can't wait to see it unfold. Lastly, the magic. This has got to be one of my favourite magic systems I've come across in the recent years, or even since picking up fantasy again over the last 3 years or so. Smoke-based magic was awesome. This magic system had such a deep and complex, sordid history that was explored throughout the story. It explained how the Smokesmiths came to be, and then that continued to expand as the reader went through the book. Smokesmiths aren't overly common, and each person who can inhale the smoke may be open to a number of different superhuman abilities, and they're really cool to see in battles in everyday life, and we got some fun snippets of how the magic worked. We do get to see a number of these abilities used in Seeds of War, and each time they were pretty awesome. So I wanted more, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that magic expands. The magic also had consequences, which I enjoy. I do like when the use of magic does have a backlash or a consequence for the people using it. When people were breathing in the smoke and the magic was being used, the strength of the wielder diminishes. It was fun to see these consequences play out, not so much for our characters, but how they played out with users young and old. Were people stronger as they got older? Were they weaker as they got older? Those questions were answered along the way. I don't think we've seen everything the smoke can do just yet, and again, I'm pretty excited to find out what it can do in the coming installments. Like I said, I really did like a lot about Seeds of War. I think this is a great debut. However, there are a couple of things worth mentioning from a critical point of view. As a reader, I did find that some of the scenes and some of the character interactions felt a little bit rushed. There were times when an interaction or decision happened very quickly and it felt underdeveloped, for a lack of a better term. It didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of the story, but I would have been more invested in the event or character had things had more depth within that interaction. This was particularly relevant for our side characters. So each of our 3 POVs had their own side characters and we got to see them a little bit, but it was hard to become invested in their stories because they did feel like they were just there to push the plot forward for the main POV. They were so heavily intertwined with those POVs that they lost sight of who they were as their own people, in my opinion. There were also a few elements of repetition which had me questioning my life choices. For example, God himself is repeated about 4,000 times in this book, and by the end of it I was like, I get it. You are God himself, you think very highly of yourself. But those things aside, Seeds of War was solid, especially for a debut. It already feels like Silver has been writing for years and is a seasoned writer and has found their groove and their niche and what they're good at. So I can't wait to see what comes next in the Smokesmith series. Have you read Seeds of War? Are you going to pick this one up? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.